Hello everyone. This is the seventh part of the story, Marvel Unlimited Skills, I Can Download. Chapter 51, Asgard. This war would provide a lot of opportunities, and Bruce intended to seize the chance to improve his strength. First, he had to download a powerful superhero's abilities. He had the money for it, and he would get the opportunity during the war. Seeing as this was the case, his first choice was Iron Man. However, with Bruce's current identity, it would be very difficult to see Iron Man. Although, in the plot, Coulson went to find him, so Bruce set his sights on Coulson. Just as that thought came up, Bruce discarded it. If I am too active, I will attract a lot of unwanted attention. For now, it was better to keep a low profile. He had to be wary of many things before becoming one of the strongest superheroes. Later, Bruce entered the base. Except for the fact that there were somehow even more agents, the base did not look much different from before. The thing Hild dealt with was among the top secrets of S.H.I.E.L.D., so naturally not many agents knew about it. But that would all change soon. A certain event should happen tonight that would shake the whole of S.H.I.E.L.D. up. In the meantime, Bruce stood on the second floor of the base, looking calm. He was wordless, and he was waiting for something. "Hey Bruce, long time no see," Bill said from behind him. Bruce still maintained his silence. "Nothing happened recently, but I have an ominous feeling." As soon as Bill said that, Bruce turned around and looked at Bill with a little surprise. "Perhaps you're right, what event do you think will happen?" "Wee woo." And just then, a shrill siren began to go off. All the agents stood where they were, at a loss of what to do. After all, ever since the base had been built, the alarm had never rang. But today, it suddenly rang. What happened? The alarm will only go off if some major event happens. My friend said an unusual incident occurred in one of our secret bases. An unusual incident, what exactly? Some agents began to discuss it, but no one knew what happened specifically. And in the background, the siren was still ringing. "Everyone gather." Soon, Zoe's voice was heard. He walked out of the office quickly, his face filled with worry. "Bruce, come gather all the agents with me, the sooner we gather them the better." Zoe saw Bruce and instantly gave him an order. Currently in the base, the highest level agent was level 7. "Okay, sir." "Bill, you go to the logistics department, and ask them to send all the helicopters." Since the alarm had rung, it represented that the base had entered its emergency state. "Yes, sir." Bill immediately executed Bruce's order and began to gather helicopters. "Everyone, listen. Gather at the rotor station." Bruce shouted, and the panicked agents immediately calmed down. "Yes, sir." The agents replied as they began to gather. In the meantime, Zoe entered the command room and began to deal with all the urgent matters. The agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. were all well trained, so their discipline was very high. In less than 10 minutes, all the agents had gathered. A total of more than 100 agents had gathered at the rotor station. Among them, there were 5 level 7 agents, and 10 level 6 agents. These top agents had a problem, however. Who would command all these agents? There was no one of a higher level present. How about Bruce? At that time, Zoe recommended Bruce. "I agree. I agree." These were the agents that had lost to Bruce in the previous test, so they acknowledged him as the leader rather quickly. Bruce nodded slightly, but he knew that everything they did here was pointless. It would take at least 20 minutes to reach the place, and when they did, everything would be too late. With that said, however, he still had to make a decision. "Well, Zoe, what's the state of the base now?" Bruce asked. Zoe solemnly stood up and said, "One of our secret bases was attacked. The enemy claimed to be from a god domain that was called Asgard. And Hawkeye has defected for unknown reasons." When this was revealed to everyone, they were all shocked. God domain, Asgard? Hawkeye betrayed us? The agents all felt shocked. But Zoe ignored their shock and continued speaking. "Now Director Fury is fighting with the enemy, and Coulson is on the way. So we need to move immediately, as this time, the enemy is very strange. Zoe glanced at everyone and said. Then he looked at Bruce. Now that Bruce was the temporary leader they had elected, every decision would be made by him. Zoe takes 70 agents to support Director Fury. I will lead the others to meet up with Coulson. If the helicopters are not enough, you can use anything to reach your destination. The sooner the better. Now, move. Bruce gave the order directly without hesitation and provided 2 routes. He knew it would be useless, but he could achieve his goal of meeting up with Coulson. That was his real intention. Yes, sir. Everyone said in unison and moved out. Chapter 52, Plot. The agents with Bruce were all only level 4 or 5. All the top agents went with Zoe in their attempt to support the director, Nick Fury. Everyone moved. And as the commander, Bruce had 2 big helicopters. Soon, the helicopter's door opened. Meanwhile at this time, the whole ground was sinking in some other area in New York, followed by the screaming of the crowd. The ground was covered with debris, and the police were evacuating the crowd out from the area. In the dark of night, in the sky, 4 helicopters were chasing their enemy. And in a car, a long-haired man that wore a green robe was just sitting there, looking extremely evil. Just his body had revealed a tremendous power, not to mention his other aspects. This kind of power did not belong to a human from Earth. This person was immortal as far as all types of bullets came, and even to other superheroes, his body seemed almost invulnerable. He was holding a spear inlaid with a blue energy stone. And on the blue energy stone, a terrifying force was gathering, flashing a dazzling light. In front of him there were 4 cars acting as meat shields and leading the way. Dr. Eric Selvig and Hawkeye were sitting in one of those cars, looking very calm. But there was a strange blue light in their eyes that almost seemed unnoticeable. It was obvious to S.H.I.E.L.D., however, that both of them as well as the men in the cars were controlled by something. Nonetheless, not far behind those cars, the 4 helicopters were still in pursuit. All 4 of them were equipped with large-caliber machine guns, but the man in green was not moved in the slightest. The man was, after all, the evil god Loki, the king of Asgard, the son of Odin, and the brother of Thor. Meanwhile, inside of one of the helicopters, S.H.I.E.L.D. director Nick Fury was shooting from one of the machine guns. The 2 sides were constantly fighting, but Hawkeye and Loki were way too powerful. Fury and his agents had no superpowers to speak of, which made them very passive. "Coulson, how much longer?" Fury said in the intercom. "Soon, sir, I have already informed the base." After that, Nick Fury put down the intercom and continued to fight with Loki and company. The Tesseract must not be taken away by them. Over the years, the Tesseract had been kept by S.H.I.E.L.D. and Fury knew the power it held very well. Because of this, no matter what, he had to recapture it. But currently, they were in an unfavorable state in their fight against Loki, even if their firepower was very fierce. Meanwhile on the other side, Bruce had found Coulson's group. They were moving extremely fast, but in the end, it had been doomed to fail from the start. "Sir, the director's helicopter has been hit by the enemy." Inside one of the helicopters, the aviator looked at Bruce and said. Sure enough. Although some details had changed a little in the Marvel Universe because of his crossover, the general trend of major events was still the same. In the next part, Fury would officially begin the Avengers plan. Soon, Bruce met up with Coulson. "Bruce, are you on vacation?" Coulson asked, anxiousness showing on his face. Currently, Fury's life or death was unknown, so he had a right to be worried. "Regarding this, what more can I do?" Bruce replied, and Coulson nodded. "Sir, can you hear me?" Coulson shouted again to Fury's intercom. "The Tesseract has been taken away by the enemy." From the other side of the intercom came Fury's voice. "Many people are still under the secret base, but the ground has collapsed." "What should we do, sir?" From the other side, Hill said. At this time, there were some agents that had arrived at Fury's location, but it was still impossible to catch up with Loki. "Coulson, you will immediately go back to the base and pull the level 7 alarm. The war has started." Nick Fury gave the highest order, and whether it be Hill or Coulson, both of them had a solemn expression on their face. This thing appeared to be far more serious than they had thought. "Copy that, sir, our men have arrived, I will begin to prepare." After saying that, Coulson ignored everyone else and shut down the intercom. Bruce stood aside and said nothing from beginning to end. The secret base where S.H.I.E.L.D. had been studying the Tesseract had become nothing more than a ruin. This time around, S.H.I.E.L.D. had really suffered some heavy losses. Under the secret base, there were still many elite agents buried, but it was unknown just how many of them were still alive. Coulson sighed slightly as he realized the seriousness of the matter. They were going to start the other plan after all. "Bruce, follow me, everyone else, returns the base, now," Coulson ordered, and everyone began to move. In the car, Coulson sat beside Bruce, the solemn expression still on his face. "Bruce, the war has begun." Bruce nodded, he had long been prepared for this. While they were returning, Coulson had made several calls and had arranged some things. But Bruce did not care, he remained quiet. He had no need to say anything, because he was already very clear on what they were going to do. Soon after, everyone returned to the base. Fury had yet to show up, but Bruce knew that the plan should have already begun. Coulson took Bruce to his office, then took out a phone and began to dial. "I know you are on the 3rd floor, Shu Han丨. There are 4 F-22 fighters, 8 miles away. Now let that woman listen, or I will blow you." Soon after, he spoke again. "Hurry back to the base, the situation is very urgent, Barton is being controlled by something." After saying that, Coulson waited for a few minutes. Bruce had been staying behind Coulson from beginning to end. Of course, he already knew who Coulson was talking to, so he had no need to eavesdrop. Soon after, Coulson hung up the phone and turned to Bruce. "Bruce, I will take you to your new task, and don't ask. You will know what it is when you get there. First, I will take you to meet someone." Coulson's tone was extremely serious, so Bruce knew who he was referring to. But to keep up appearances, he still asked, "Who?" Coulson smiled, walked up to Bruce and patted his shoulder. "Stark Industrial Group Chairman, Playboy, billionaire, Iron Man, or better yet, Tony Stark." Hearing this, a glimmer appeared in Bruce's eyes. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Chapter 53, New Function. Bruce has been waiting for Coulson to say that. Prior to this, he had been expecting all of this to happen. And afterwards, when he saw that his own strength was valued by Coulson, he was certain that when Coulson went to find Iron Man he would bring him along. Everything was under Bruce's control. "It seems that this time Sir's plan is not simple," Bruce joked, but Coulson stayed quiet. Over the past month, Bruce had performed several missions, and the way he handled each one of them made him very satisfied. Regardless, it was his actual strength and combat prowess that he valued. In addition, Coulson had a deep respect for Iron Man, and by bringing Bruce along this time, he could cheer himself up. "You will know these things soon." Coulson laughed. He had sort of promoted Bruce, that's why he wanted to bring Bruce on to this plan. It was actually an unprecedented plan, and one for which Bruce was more than qualified for. "Okay then, let's go." Iron Man, as one of the 3 big shots of the Avengers, whether it be in status or strength, he was incomparable. His advanced technology, however, was what everyone most admired about him. It could be said that in the whole of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Iron Man was a big priority and one of the main characters which the plot revolved around. This time when Bruce completed the mission, he got $5 million as a reward, which meant that he could purchase a single 5000x download speedup. With that amount of money, Bruce had the confidence to download Iron Man's best and unique ability. "This time around, I hope I can download Iron Man's brain." At the very least, he hoped he would be able to download his Mark armor, which was a really powerful tool in itself. Coulson nodded and set off with Bruce. As soon as Coulson and Bruce got in the car and were en route to the Stark Industries building, the voice of the system began speaking in Bruce's mind. "Congratulations to the host on entering the Avengers I scenario. Turning on the energy value function. Beep, energy value activated. activating the one-click download function and providing information on two other functions. Beep, the energy value is being calculated. Energy value function. This made Bruce a bit confused yet excited at the same time. But in that moment of confusion and excitement, two floods of memories surged into Bruce's mind. The memories were all about the new functions of the system, and it took Bruce a while to fully digest them. When he did, however, there was only a look of surprise left in his eyes. The energy value function, in short, worked something like this. Depending on how strong the enemy Bruce was facing was, he would get energy value during his fight. He didn't need to completely kill off or defeat the enemy, as long as he was fighting with the enemy he would proceed to get energy value. Of course, killing off the enemy or defeating them would also net him the energy value. At the present stage of the energy value, there were a couple of additional functions. First of all, as long as he had enough energy value, he could use the one-click download function. He wouldn't need to purchase any speedups or wait for the download to finish, he would just finish the download instantly. Before this, when Bruce downloaded super abilities that had a huge amount of data, he needed to purchase a download speedup, otherwise it would take him much longer than he could afford. But now, as long as he had enough energy value, he could download abilities with just one click. But with the energy value he could only download the abilities that required energy value. Otherwise he could only download the data of the abilities, which would require download speedups. The two functions could be used without thinking. Before this, Bruce could only use data to download abilities. For example, if an ability was 50 gigabytes, he would need to download 50 gigabytes worth of data. Now, if an ability needed 1000 energy value, he could only download it with energy value, he couldn't download the data like usual. The second function was ability synthesis. Like the name suggested, similar abilities could be combined and then transformed into a single more powerful ability. The shortcoming to the otherwise overpowered function was that it only worked on similar abilities, and could not be used on anything else. The more powerful the abilities, the more energy would need to be consumed. Finally, there was the hero-level equipment upgrade function. For example, the vibranium shield Bruce had obtained before. It would consume energy value to upgrade it to become even more powerful. The good thing about this function was that the upgrades worked like an all-around upgrade instead of focusing on only one thing. If Bruce had a Mark I Warframe, he could upgrade it to a Mark II Warframe using energy value. And if he had enough, he could even upgrade it straight into the nano armor of the Mark 50 which appeared in Avengers: Infinity War. It could be said that the function of energy value that was recently activated was extremely powerful and terrifying. It could also now be seen why after Bruce digested all that new information, his eyes were filled with excitement. The function of the unlimited download system was beyond his wildest imaginations. Moreover, in the memories that the system had given him, there were hints that in the future, he could unlock even more absurd functions. However, for now, these functions had no way of getting activated. Be that as it may, Bruce had actually only activated the one-click download function. As for the synthesis and upgrade functions, they had not been activated for the time being. In the massive memories that had surged into his brain, he found that if he wanted to unlock more functions, he would need to progress into the plot. As for how to progress into the plot, that was the easy part. He just had to follow the main storyline of the Marvel movie universe to progress. 1. And while he was a variable, it was best not to interfere yet. Otherwise it would be judged as disrupting the plot, which would lead to him being unable to obtain other functions. Of course, having said that, it was also not an easy thing to disturb the plot. Unless Bruce actually brought major changes during a major event, he could continue to progress into the main storyline. For example, the Mind Gem had to be obtained by Hydra, otherwise the plot of Avengers: Infinity War could not develop. That was the whole point of the restriction. 1. As for everything else, Bruce was free to do whatever he liked. As long as he did not seriously interfere with the plot, he would not have much impact. According to Bruce's understanding of the system, only when he was powerful enough would he be able to do whatever he wanted. But for now, he should focus on progressing into the plot of Avengers: Infinity War. So, Besides downloading, I need to guide the plot now. The strength of the system was really beyond his imagination. Seeing the uses of the energy value was enough to make him be able to defy a god. And at this moment, Bruce had complete confidence that he would be able to crush Thanos and dominate the universe in the future. "What's wrong, Bruce? Are you uncomfortable?" Coulson asked. "I'm okay, sir." Bruce smiled and behaved extremely normal. Coulson just nodded when he saw that. After reassuring Coulson, Bruce instantly opened his system panel again. Name, Bruce Lite. Identity, Level 6 Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Ability, Marksman, Anti-Aging Gene, Spider Telepathy, Super Serum Gene, Super Endurance, Body and Shield as 1, Adsorbent Ability, Super Speed, Super Strength, Mind Control Immunity, Self-Healing, Strengthened Hands, Super Vision, Pig Iron Body, Superb Level Fighting Technique, Saber Proficiency, Firearms Proficiency, Covert Tracking. Warehouse, Vibranium Shield. Balance, $5 million. Energy value, 20 points, can be used for one-click download. Sure enough, there was an extra energy value column in the panel, but it could only be used for the one-click download function as of now. As for the synthesis and upgrade functions, they would gradually be unlocked. The extra 20 energy value he had gotten was obtained from all the enemies he had previously fought, defeated or killed. Bruce shook his head slightly, with a hint of bitterness on his face. He had experienced many battles before, but they all actually amounted to nothing more than 20 points of energy value. From this alone it could be seen just how difficult it would be to obtain energy value in the future. Regardless, Bruce didn't pay it much attention, as the New York War had already begun. "Bruce, we have arrived." Chapter 54, Iron Man. At this time, Bruce stopped his daydreaming and looked at the impressively massive building in front of him. Stark Industries was truly one of a kind, and today they were visiting the person who built it from the ground up. "This guy is unpredictable, we have to be careful when talking to him," Coulson said, standing beneath the huge building with a bitter smile on his face. Afterwards, they entered Stark's mansion together. Because of Coulson's special status, no guard stopped them when they came inside the building, but they couldn't get into the elevator. There were not a lot of guards in the building, not because they weren't needed, but because the security was mostly controlled by an AI security system that Iron Man personally invented named Jarvis. "Hello, I want to see Mr. Stark." Coulson stood in front of the elevator and said to a screen. "Hello, Mr. Coulson. I am afraid that this is not a suitable time for Mr. Stark." From the screen they heard a voice that told them that Iron Man was currently preoccupied. Coulson shook his head slightly and made a phone call in helplessness. As Jarvis had not yet matured enough, he was able to use S.H.I.E.L.D.'s power to modify it. Beep! And sure enough, just a minute later, the elevator door opened and Coulson and Bruce walked inside. This was Iron Man's personal elevator. It could directly rise to the top floor and it was also the fastest way to reach him. While they were inside the elevator, Coulson called Iron Man again. But just like last time, he didn't answer the phone, which made Coulson feel helpless. That's just his personality. Coulson looked at Bruce and bitterly smiled. He could do nothing about it. Even if it was S.H.I.E.L.D.'s director in person, he could still do nothing about Iron Man. Beep! Just as Coulson tried to talk, the elevator door opened. They had reached the top floor of Stark Industries, but more importantly, they had reached the floor where Iron Man worked. All kinds of high-tech devices appeared in front of Bruce. There was even a holographic image operating system. The whole floor looked all futuristic. And that's what Bruce admired about Iron Man, his mind truly worked in different ways. At this moment, a man in black was sitting on the sofa in the middle of the office, holding a bottle of wine. He had a special temperament. It was one that could only be developed by someone who had been in a high position for a long time. But Bruce didn't see Pepper Potts next to him. It seemed that the Marvel universe he lived in had changed a little, although the main plot point hadn't changed yet. "Hey Coulson, did you come to congratulate me on my success on the new Stark Energy?" Stark looked at Coulson and said. "Tony, I have some very important things to discuss with you." Coulson went straight to the point with a serious expression plastered on his face. Do you need me to save the world again? Ha! Who is this gentleman? Iron Man didn't pay any attention to Coulson's words, but instead looked toward Bruce and asked with confusion in his tone. Without hesitating, Bruce stopped in front of Stark and offered a handshake as he calmly said, "Hello Mr. Stark, my name's Bruce Lite, level 6 agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Although Iron Man was a proud man, that did not mean that he was impolite. He knew what the S.H.I.E.L.D. organization represented, and although he pretended not to care about it on the surface, he in fact paid very close attention to it. Since Bruce was one of Coulson's people, he didn't have any doubts about him and held out his hand. "Hello, I'm Tony Stark." As soon as both of their hands came into contact, all of Iron Man's abilities were on display in front of him. Name, Tony Stark. Identity, Iron Man, Chairman of Stark Industries. Ability, Super Brain, Energy Value, 10,000, Business Management, 50 GB, Top-Level Fighting Technique, 620 MB, Mark 7 Armor, Energy Value, 50. Iron Man didn't have a lot of abilities, in fact, he only had 4. But just 2 of these abilities had made him into one of the 3 big shots in the Avengers. Those 2 were of course, his Super Brain and the Mark 7 Armor. The problem Bruce currently faced was that Stark's Super Brain and his Mark 7 Armor couldn't be downloaded using data, they could only be downloaded via energy value. The Mark 7 Armor was still within his acceptable range, but when he looked at the energy value requirement for the Super Brain, he was too terrified to even think about it. At the same time though, the requirements made sense. After all, the Mark Armor was invented by Iron Man, so the core technology was in his hands, which made all of the armors unique. Bruce was not surprised at all about this. Iron Man's brain was his most powerful weapon, and it was in fact among the most valuable things in the whole of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So it could not be downloaded using data, moreover the energy value required to download it had reached a staggering 10,000 points. The only seemingly positive thing to this ridiculously large number was that if Bruce had the 10,000 points of energy value, he could download it directly without wasting any time on waiting. As for the Mark 7 Armor, Bruce currently only had 20 points of energy value, and was still 30 points short. Bruce could already imagine that in the future he wouldn't use data to download anything, but would instead use energy value purely out of convenience. Another thing to point out was that when the data size reaches a certain extent, it could be converted into energy value. Abilities that needed energy value to be downloaded would certainly be leaps and bounds above the ones that could be downloaded through data. Besides the 2 abilities that Bruce couldn't get yet, Iron Man still had 2 abilities left. Sadly for Bruce however, he had no use for either of them. He could foresee that the superheroes that would appear in the future would only have abilities that could be downloaded via energy value. It seems that I have to find some way to get a lot of energy value. I'm only lacking 30 points of energy value right now, after that I can download Iron Man's Mark 7 Armor. After getting the energy value function, he only lacked a suit of Mark Armor. After that, he could use energy value to upgrade it and have a better Mark Armor than even Iron Man himself. For now it was impossible for him to get it, but in the future he would definitely download Iron Man's Mark Armor. As for his Super Brain, well, that was a no-brainer. It was among the most valuable things in the whole Marvel Universe, so as long as he had the chance he would definitely not pass up on it. Even wish just a Super Brain, it would make him comparable to those so-called gods. Thinking of that, Bruce, who was slightly disappointed because he was unable to download any of Iron Man's abilities, got excited once again. He reminded himself that he was just temporarily unable to download them, not that he could not download them. As long as he had enough energy value, he would take everything Iron Man had to offer. "Tony, look at this." At this moment, Coulson spoke. He was holding a laptop near Iron Man's hands. Bruce squinted slightly. Coulson was showing Stark all the information on the first generation of Avengers, which meant that he would see them soon. After Iron Man saw what was on the laptop, his eyes lit up. It seems that there will be a lot of work to do tonight. Chapter 55, Conspiracy. Iron Man knew about the Avengers project, but even he didn't know who the exact members were. And now that Coulson had brought information about the first generation of Avengers to him, he took it seriously. Before today, he knew that he was not the only special person in the world, and that there were other superheroes out there besides him. Despite that, however, he hadn't bothered to gather detailed information on them. Naturally, S.H.I.E.L.D. couldn't ignore their existence like Iron Man had, so they had this type of information, and they had it in spares. Coulson, you go back first. I'm going to do my homework on the superheroes tonight, but I'll be there on time tomorrow. Glimpsing at the information, Iron Man said without even blinking. Okay, I'll report back to Director Fury. Coulson smiled and heaved a long sigh of relief, before making eye contact with Bruce and signaling that they would leave this play now. Bruce looked back at Iron Man for one last time, then turned away and directly left. He needed to find a way to accumulate energy value quickly. After all, the Super Brain and the Mark 7 armor were far too important to him. In fact, that's the only thing he could focus on right now. If he somehow managed to get his hands on Iron Man's Super Brain, mastering abilities would become way faster and his thought process would become way more efficient. After all, Iron Man was definitely a genius, and despite the extremely high amount of energy value required to obtain his Super Brain, it was worth every penny. His brain had accumulated a lot of knowledge about physics and other areas of study related to technology. If Bruce owned such a brain, he would be the best in the world when it came to inventing and learning. Iron Man's nickname, the top scientific genius in the Marvel Universe, was not just for show, and instead he more than lived up to its name. Bruce would even go as far as to say that to some extent, Iron Man's super brain ability was more powerful than the Infinity Stones. That was Bruce's ultimate goal he had made as soon as he met Iron Man. Moreover, the Mark armor was definitely a powerful ability as well as equipment, and a lot of people wanted to get their hands on one of those. It was the most modern technology to date, and it was a unique technology made by Iron Man that almost no one could copy. That alone was another reason as to why Iron Man was so powerful. However, as long as Bruce downloaded it, then it would belong to Bruce. As for the lost energy, because he had the warehouse function, Bruce could replenish it at any time. It was much more useful than the arc reactor on Iron Man's chest. Besides that, once the Mark armor was damaged, as long as he had enough time he could restore it to its peak condition with the warehouse function. I need to hurry up. Bruce had a lot of wishes, but almost all of them required the use of energy value. At this point, Bruce had already decided that he had to do something to find a way to obtain energy value quickly. It had become Bruce's primary goal. At this time, Bruce already had a vague plan of what to do in his head. Soon afterwards, Bruce and Coulson walked out of the Stark Industries building and got in their car. Let's go pick up the captain. Coulson looked back at Bruce with a smile on his face. He had decided to let Bruce join his mission. Bruce, we have a secret base, and it's gonna blow your mind when you see it. Coulson said mysteriously, but Bruce just smiled in response. We will see Captain America soon, are you nervous? Hearing this, Coulson smiled in embarrassment. In fact, he was indeed very nervous, as in his mind, Captain America was a hero among heroes, as well as his inspiration. Soon, the two appeared in the Avengers base. Captain America had been waiting for them for a long time, whereas Director Fury had already left. They greeted each other first, and since the captain knew Bruce well, they didn't say too much. After that, they boarded the Quinjet together. This was the S.H.I.E.L.D's newest warplane, and whether it be its speed or technology, it was all the best the world could offer. On the plane, they met another old acquaintance. And surprisingly, it was the Black Widow herself. After seeing Bruce on the plane, Black Widow was also a little surprised. After all, the last time she saw Bruce, he was still a level 5 agent. But while she was at the base, she also heard a lot of things about Bruce. After greeting all of them, Black Widow sat down with a charming smile on her face and said, "Gentlemen, we're ready to go." After that, she started the plane. And this time, their destination wasn't an Avengers base or a S.H.I.E.L.D. one. Meanwhile, on the plane, Coulson was talking with the captain. Hey Bruce. Just as Bruce was beginning to think about his plans for the future, Coulson's voice came. His face was very serious. Bruce's eyes were still calm as he knew what Coulson was going to say next. Now since you have joined the mission, there are a lot of things that I can tell you. Coulson took Bruce very seriously. Although Bruce was only a level 6 agent, he was one of Coulson's best and brightest agents. So after dragging Bruce into his mission, Coulson was ready to tell Bruce all about the Avengers plan. He started telling Bruce about Hawkeye, Captain America, Black Widow, and even the person they recently met, Iron Man. Although Bruce had already known everything, he still needed to pretend to be shocked. For ordinary people and even agents, this was indeed supposed to be an unimaginable thing. This is incredible, Bruce said with a stunned look on his face after hearing Coulson's words. Coulson showed understanding towards Bruce's shock, and just patted Bruce's shoulder gently. In the future, you need to be more careful, because this event is beyond the confines of S.H.I.E.L.D. Even though he knew that Bruce was very strong, in Coulson's mind, Bruce was just an ordinary agent. And how could an ordinary person, or even agent, fight against those terrifying beings? That was why S.H.I.E.L.D. would only be in charge of the logistics and support, whereas the ones who would be fighting would be the Avengers themselves. Mr. Coulson, when Captain America and the Avengers go on a mission, can I join them? Bruce asked, as he suddenly remembered something very important. If things went as they should, they would soon find Loki. And as long as they found Loki, he would get the opportunity to fight with Loki, which would subsequently get him the energy value he so desperately needed. Although Loki may not be the most powerful superhero in the Marvel Universe, he still came from Asgard after all, so he had to be worth a lot of energy value. Most importantly, he wanted to obtain a decent amount of energy value from Loki, but that was not the only reason he had. He also wanted to know if he could download any of Loki's abilities. After all, while his primary objective at the moment was to obtain energy value, the grand goal was to become more powerful. Chapter 56, Dr. Banner. After Coulson heard what Bruce said, he instinctively frowned a little, feeling very surprised. To him, Bruce was just an ordinary human. No matter how strong he was nothing but cannon fodder at the end of the day. Coulson, Bruce is very strong. I agree with him, we should let him join us in performing missions together. The captain said. He knew Bruce well enough. In the previous spar they had, he actually hadn't had an advantage despite being at his peak and using most of his strength. After hearing Captain America speak up for him, Coulson was surprised once again. He knew Captain America, and he also knew that the captain was not one to give his judgment on others easily. Okay Bruce, you can do this mission alongside Captain America. Since Captain America supported Bruce, it was only natural that Coulson wouldn't refuse. And besides that, he also had a decent grasp of Bruce's abilities and strength. The Black Widow who was driving the jet flashed a smile. She was now very interested in Bruce. Time gradually passed bit by bit as the trio continued their small talk. They had been talking for a long time already when Black Widow's voice was heard. We will arrive soon, get ready. Bruce, the captain and Coulson who were standing in the cockpit, all looked down. They saw a huge ship that resembled an iron monster, looking very impressive, even for a S.H.I.E.L.D. base. There were a lot of Quinjets on it. The whole ship in the vast sea gave people an incomparable feeling. Of course, that was only so for ordinary people. As Bruce had already known what it really was, a secret base and facility belonging to S.H.I.E.L.D., a helicarrier. Yet despite already knowing about its existence and even having seen it in the movies, he was still in awe when he saw it for himself, up close and personal. Soon afterwards, the plane landed. Captain America and company all stepped out of the plane and stared at the spectacular scene before them. Meanwhile, on the deck of the helicarrier, a man glanced at his surroundings with a little surprise. But despite the surprise, the man was on full alert, and he seemed to be ready to deal with anything that was thrown at him, Quinjets or otherwise. After hearing the roar of the plane landing, he turned back and looked at Captain America and company. Hello Doctor, Coulson had told me that you would come, Captain America said with some surprise as he looked at the person in front of him. Yes Captain, he also told me the same thing, the man said with a smile on his face. Yet the caution in his eyes remained, and could be seen by anyone. Bruce stood aside with a gleam in his eyes. After officially entering the Avengers' plot, he would see the most powerful superheroes of the first generation gradually appear before his eyes, one by one. And currently in front of him, stood the Green Giant, the Hulk himself. Without hesitating, he directly walked up to him as he had done on a lot of different occasions now. "Hello Doctor, my name is Bruce Lite." The Hulk, also known as Dr. Banner, nodded his head in response and politely extended his hand as well. "Hello, Mr. Lite." As they were both named Bruce, he decided to refer to Bruce as Mr. Lite, in order to not stir up confusion. And just like all the other times, right when their hands touched together, Dr. Banner's information immediately popped up in Bruce's mind. Name, Bruce Banner. Identity, the Hulk, Green Giant, Doctorate in Physics. Ability, Hulk's Rage, Energy Value, 10,000, Hulk's Power, Energy Value, 30,000, Hulk's Body, Energy Value, 3,000, Regeneration Ability, 1,000 gigabytes. The Hulk only had 4 abilities on him, but they could all be categorized as superpowers that were terrifyingly powerful. Especially the Hulk's Rage ability, that was Dr. Banner's signature ability as well as where most of his strength came from. The more angry the Hulk was, the more powerful he got. In fact, if the Hulk was in one of his great frenzies, it would not be very difficult for him to destroy an entire city. What made the Hulk really scary, however, was that his ability Hulk's Rage and Hulk's Power had a direct connotation. If he wanted to strike in his most powerful form, he had to get that additional strength from his Hulk's Rage ability. A good example of this would be the plot of the Avengers during the Age of Ultron, where Hulk was not angry enough and he was suppressed by a Hulkbuster. But if Hulk was angry enough, he could easily deal with the Hulkbuster. Unfortunately for Bruce, he didn't have enough energy value for any of his abilities, at least not yet. This made him look forward to this first New York War even more. Only when the fighting began would he be able to accumulate energy value. Currently, Bruce's biggest problem was that he was unable to download Hulk's most powerful abilities. It was pretty tragic actually. But fortunately for him, the regeneration ability that the Hulk hadn't required energy value. Yet although the Hulk's regeneration ability was also very powerful, it was not among his best abilities, so the system required data, and not energy value for it. It was akin to an extremely upgraded version of his self-healing ability. In fact, according to what Bruce knew, this ability's regeneration power was so strong that it could even almost regenerate limbs. It was very close to being an equal to Wolverine and Deadpool's regeneration powers. Although the only catch was that the ability required a lot of energy to use. But if Bruce obtained this ability, even if he somehow lost his heart one day, he could still keep his life. He would become very hard to kill, unless he was directly split apart into pieces. As for the other abilities Hulk had, all Bruce could do was accumulate enough energy value and come back for them later on. Bruce was feeling very helpless. It was like there was a mountain of gold in front of him, but he just couldn't get it yet. Regardless of that, one day, sooner or later, whether it be Hulk's abilities or Iron Man's abilities, he would download them all and become the strongest. Immediately afterwards, Bruce decided to download the regeneration ability, which required a whopping 1,000 gigabytes. Regardless of that, he could finish it within 5 minutes with the speed-up function. Beep, connection successful. Beep, regeneration ability, size 1000 GB, download initializing. Beep, current download speed is 5 MB/s, valid within 20 meters. Without any hesitation, Bruce used up 1 million of his funds and directly purchased the 1000x speed-up. "Bruce, we have other work to do, let's go first." Just as Bruce was finished connecting, however, Coulson's voice was heard. This came as a big surprise to Bruce, as he had to stay within 20 meters of Drive Banner for the next 4 minutes. Otherwise, the connection would break and the consequences were that the 1 million he used would have been for nothing. "Yes, Mr. Coulson," Bruce said, as he could not start behaving weird in front of Coulson, especially not now that he was using the system's abilities. "It was nice to meet you, Dr. Banner. I would really want to stay with you and chat for a while, but it appears that I have to go." Bruce laughed. This made the person in question and even the captain feel weird. Everyone knew how terrifying Dr. Banner was when he was angry, yet this guy unexpectedly wanted to stay and chat for a while longer with him. Just how bold was Bruce? "Mr. Lite, there's no rush, we still have a lot of time left," Banner said, not doubting Bruce in the slightest. Afterwards, Bruce let go of Banner's hand and left with Coulson after saying his farewells to the others. 20 meters. I must keep within 20 meters. Although he still had a lot of money left over, there were still a lot of superheroes that he had not met yet. So keeping that in mind, he had to leave some leeway for himself. But now that Coulson had called for him to go, he had to think of something to delay their leave, at least for another 3 minutes. Chapter 57, Regeneration. How can I stay within 20 meters of Drive Banner for a couple of more minutes? While pondering, he didn't do any unusual actions but instead walked towards Coulson. "Mr. Coulson, is the helicarrier our secret base?" Bruce randomly asked, doing his best to stall for time. "Yes, how about it, is it an eye-opener?" Coulson laughed, having no suspicions about Bruce's intentions yet. Bruce was currently 10 meters out, with only 2 minutes remaining before the download finished. He calculated in his head, while his pace was slow enough that he would make it, Coulson's was quite fast. "Is this one of our new warplanes? Why haven't I seen it before?" Desperate for time, Bruce suddenly pointed at one of the planes and asked with as much curiosity as he could muster. Thinking that this was a normal reaction for an agent's first time on the base, Coulson stood next to Bruce and patiently explained. After Coulson was done, there was only 1 minute left. For the first time in a long time, Bruce felt that time was moving too slowly, and now he was 15 meters away from Drive Banner. At that exact moment, Dr. Banner started pacing around. Seeing that Banner could unintentionally exceed the maximum distance at any time, Bruce broke out in a cold sweat and raised his voice a notch, "Mr. Coulson." Seeing that Bruce was acting unusual, Coulson walked up to him in a hurry. "What's wrong with you, Bruce?" Bruce shook his head to reply that he was okay in response, and took a deep breath. From the corner of his eye, he could see that the captain had started walking towards Banner, and his face changed. And just then, he heard a familiar voice sound out in his mind. "Beep, download complete. Beep, congratulations, you have obtained the regeneration ability." When he heard the familiar voice of the system, he completely relaxed, feeling most of his stress drift away. And as if they had staged this whole event, just as he heard the system's messages, Banner walked out of the 20-meter zone. This was his first scare, per se. He wasn't in any danger, but the feeling of almost having thrown away $1 million made him feel worse than actually getting stabbed in the heart. Regardless of that, he quickly moved on from that feeling as he felt that after obtaining the regeneration ability, every cell in his body was quickly evolving. This time it was different from before, as previously his genes underwent a kind of fusion, whereas this time, they were really evolving. His cells, pores and even his hair were all changing. Every cell in his body was currently active, which was an indescribable feeling, especially as he felt it in every single corner of his body. After the process was finished, Bruce's cells had evolved to an unprecedented state. He felt as if he had endless strength now. This was really a complete evolution for him, and it could be seen why these kinds of abilities were called superpowers. Since undergoing that evolution, Bruce could now be officially said to have stepped out of a regular human's boundaries, and into something more, perhaps better. In Bruce's current state, unless his head was cut off or he was blown into a million pieces, he wouldn't die. Still, it was a bit of a pity that his current regeneration ability was somewhat inferior to Deadpool and Wolverine's regeneration abilities. Their abilities were truly horrifying if one gave it some serious thought. Even so, Bruce was quite satisfied with his new ability. Besides, there were still plenty of other superpowers waiting to be downloaded. "Bruce, do you need me to call a doctor?" As he was still deep in his thought process, Coulson's voice made him come back to reality, and as soon as he did, he noticed that Coulson was a little worried. Bruce quickly stood up and gave out a slight smile while saying, "No need, Mr. Coulson, I was just feeling a little uncomfortable just now, it's an old weakness." In reality, Bruce had never felt better. But at that time, he was desperate for time, and that's the best he could come up with. "Alright then, if you have any problems though, don't hide them from me. After that, they went to the control center of the ship together. It occupied a very large area, and it was full of all kinds of precise instruments. Naturally, for it to occupy such a large space, it had to be important, and sure enough almost all of the elite agents on the ship were in here. Of course, while they seemed like a lot, those elite agents were in reality only a small part of all of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s agents. "Bruce, you're also here," Hill said, who was commanding the helicarrier. After spotting Bruce, a small smile creeped onto her face. She had quite the positive feelings for him. Bruce nodded and greeted her. "Bruce, get a move on, we need to go greet Director Fury," Coulson looked at Bruce and said. Hearing this, Bruce glanced at the front. This was his first time meeting the S.H.I.E.L.D. director, who was also nicknamed the Spy Emperor. Somewhat surprisingly, he looked exactly the same as he did in the movies, a tall African-American man that was blind in one eye. Thinking along this subject, Bruce couldn't help but wonder about Chewie that appeared in Captain Marvel. And of course, Captain Marvel herself, who was said to be the strongest superhero in the whole Marvel universe. And naturally, Bruce, the type of man that he was only interested in Captain Marvel for her strength, and nothing else. "Hello Director Fury," Bruce's eyes revealed his quite calm attitude as he greeted Fury. "Hill and Coulson have told me about you, in particular, they praised your excellent performance during the Captain America task." It was quite apparent that Director Fury appreciated capable people a lot, especially those loyal to him. Moreover, he also knew that the captain had only recovered so quickly because of Bruce's training plan. "Sir, I'm flattered. I have only done my job." Bruce smiled in response. In front of this man who was nicknamed as the Spy Emperor, he naturally had to try his best to not reveal the many things that he wished to keep hidden. Otherwise, he would be easily doubted by others for the rest of his life. The worst part about it, however, was that while he had to be quite cautious in front of the director, the man himself didn't have any interesting abilities to make up for Bruce's efforts. Fury nodded. Soon after, the Black Widow also came alongside Captain America and Dr. Banner. Bruce noticed, however, that as soon as the captain was close to Fury, he put a $10 bill in his hands. It was the exact same scene from the movie. Next, they began to act, and as the person who knew most about the Tesseract, Dr. Banner was put in charge of it. Coulson had used up all of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s resources with the end objective being finding Loki out. Everything was progressing in an orderly way. "I hope I'll see you again, we had a very pleasant chat before." Black Widow appeared on Bruce's side and said with a smile on her face. "Yes, me as well," Bruce replied in a very calm manner. Now that there were no longer any abilities on Black Widow's body that he valued, he completely lost interest in her. Hearing Bruce's cold response, however, made the Black Widow surprised and all the more interested in him. To the side, Coulson was chatting with his idol Captain America, looking very nervous when a voice came. "Sir, we've accomplished our objective," said an agent. Coulson immediately walked up to him and looked at the photo in his hands to verify. When Fury saw it, a light flashed in his eyes as he said, "Captain, are you ready to go?" Captain America nodded, he was on standby. "Sir, let Bruce follow them," said Coulson as he looked up at Fury. He said nothing in response, instead glanced toward the captain and waited for his opinion. The captain nodded to show that Bruce could follow them. This was also a recognition of Bruce's strength. "Okay Bruce, you go together with the captain." "Yes sir." Bruce replied as joy almost overwhelmed his heart. Loki was the god of the myth in Northern Europe, so he must have an ability that Bruce would want. At the same time, he could get a lot of energy value from his fight with him. "I hope this god won't disappoint me." This marks the end of Part 7 of the story Marvel Unlimited Skills, I Can Download. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.